You're listening to Bedroom Beethovens, where notable music makers tell their stories on what they sacrificed to create the music you love.
It's just your genuine appreciation on a deep soul level for what artists do. And I love hearing that.
I'm your host, Cello.
What's up? This is J-Rock, and I'm right here. I'm chilling on the Bedroom Beethovens podcast. That's what it is. Let's go.
Hey, everybody. Welcome to episode 185 of the podcast. My guest this week is...
In the year 3013, everybody wants to be a producer.
My name is Eric San, professionally known as Kid Koala. I'm a scratch DJ and film and video game music composer, theater producer, graphic novelist.
Glorious, put in the Smithsonian on podiums for holy hymns. But you see who's controlling them. Fuck myself off because of the egotistical mode I'm in. No, I can't slap you no five when you and your cuddy is talking shit about me outside. People take pride in what they have no hand in. Sorta like a phantom, holographic, handsome. But deep inside, he wanna do what his man done. Just because his peers jeer and clown. And when you 6 feet deep, no one hears you now. They say we not compatible like deers and cows and owls. So many rules and regulations say you're not allowed.
Caught in the grip of the city madness. I'm caught in the grip.
It's been a long, dynamic career for Kid Koala. Whether you know him as a Gorillaz collaborator, whether you know him as one-third of Deltron 3030, the post-apocalyptic hip-hop group made up of Del the Funkee Homosapien and, of course, producer Dan the Automator, or you're a big fan of his solo stuff through the years, the cool thing is we see ourselves on the other side of this pandemic, and we're in a time where he feels that Creatures of the Late Afternoon is the most fun album he's ever recorded, which happens to be his latest body of work due out in a few weeks. Combining energy, emotion, and a whole range of different moods, it doesn't take long to realize that this is a very special release. We talk about everything under the sun, from growing up as the black sheep in the family, using music to shape his future, and all the ins and outs of what it means to be a true pioneer in the game. Before we get to that, I just want everyone to know really quick that you will seldom hear ads on this podcast because I keep things organic and a labor of love. I have a website, bedroombeethovens.com. It acts as a hub for all things like episodes and audios there, and there's also a Patreon there. Or you can access it at patreon.com/bedroombeethovens, where you can give $1 or $2 to help show your love, and I show it back by providing early access to episodes, and we can talk, shoot the breeze, and just have a good old community over there. And last but not least, if you like the podcast, tell a friend. This show is powered by people like you. I am the little guy, the little show on the block. I've been at it for 4 years, and to keep things chugging, it just feels good to know people tune in. So leave a 5-star review on your favorite podcast platform, subscribe to the YouTube, drop me a line, engage with the show. It's what I'm here for. As warmer weather peeks out from behind the brick wall, I am honored to share with you a conversation between myself and the great and powerful Kid Koala, episode 185. Let's get this show started! I saw the live performance of Moon River a week ago in Seattle. It was really good. It must be good to go out on the road again.
Yeah. Seattle was super vibe. Substation. That was the first time we're playing at Substation. I like that venue. I think it really suited the kind of raw, punkier turntable stuff that Leilani and I were doing.
It's an interesting song to chop up, man. Is that the Audrey Hepburn version on the vocals?
That's my mom's favorite song. I just kind of throw that in there as a little change of mode within a set. I don't remember. We probably did it at the end of the show.
Yeah, I find it kind of sweet because when your career first gets started, she was kind of reluctant to even attend your shows, and over time you've had to kind of reassure her that they're safe. Music is about spreading joy, and that even though you're not a scientist or an accountant. You're doing what you
Mm,
love. And Moon
yeah.
River is a song that you've been playing in your sets for like over a decade now.
Yeah, the first time I put that routine together was because of my parents' wedding anniversary. Well, we all live in different cities, so my mom said, "Hey, we want to do a family trip and bring your sister and your brother and everybody, just to celebrate with us in the same place." And so they picked Hawaii, and so I booked a show so that I could get there. And knowing that they would want to come to the show, I said, "Okay, I'm gonna put something together for their big wedding anniversary." So that was it. It was a Saturday night, like banging club night, drum beats, dance floor, all that, and I just stopped the show in the middle because my parents were sitting up in the balcony, and I said, "This, if you don't mind, I'm going to take this moment to dedicate a routine to my parents who were up there celebrating their wedding," and it was such a wonderful vibe and response from the audience. Everybody seemed to like that moment. So since then, it's always in my crate.
Moon River, wider than a mile. I'm crossing you in style someday. Oh, dream maker, you heartbreaker, wherever you're going.
And I understand that it does work even like, say, at a place like Substation after we just did a full-on rock show. It's one of these nice moments to have in this set.
That's awesome, man. Yeah, at the top of our conversation, I mentioned that it must feel good to be out on the road because, when the world shut down a few years ago, I feel like if any musician had a right to be depressed, it was you, because you don't just get booked for dates and you play tracks. Like, you employ a lot of people. There are people creating sets. You're crafting stories. There's trained puppeteers. It's like a whole production, and that stuff is all ready to go.
Yeah.
And then you can't resume the show.
Yeah. There was an kind of an umbrella of people that do that tour with us. So you're speaking more about the Story of a Mosquito tour and the more theatrical tours, but yeah, we're like a little family out there on the road. So when that all got called off, it was it was kind of depressing. But at the same time, I mean, we pivoted like everybody else did and started working on the next show. Just started designing and writing, and but it is absolutely, in terms of spending time and space with audiences, it's a real welcome experience. But I forgot how much I missed it. Yeah.
Well, I was curious, it's been well documented about how, we had this great story you just told about how you played the song for your mom at their wedding anniversary, but it's been well documented that it was kind of a struggle for them to kind of accept what you wanted to do for a living. Like, they wanted you to be kind of, more pragmatic about your career. And I was wondering, like, obviously
Mhm.
you've adhered to your destiny. It has come to fruition. But you mentioned
Mhm.
you had a sister and you mentioned you had a brother. Did they fall
Mhm.
more in line with your parents' expectations, or are they just as much black sheep as you?
No, I'd say, as far as having a left field career choice, that would be me as the black sheep. My sister is a lawyer, and my brother is an engineer, and he works on driverless cars right now. I almost went into physics. Actually, I almost majored in physics at a high school. I really enjoyed that, and I was going to go into sciences and engineering also. But I always made art ever since I was a kid. Ever since I could hold a pencil, I was drawing on anything. When I placemats, the walls. I got in trouble for that too. And I was always creating stuff and stories. And my parents did support that. They always thought that it was something I was passionate about. However, they are pragmatic. It's like, oh, is there even a future in something like that? We'll let you go to animation summer school or whatever. but but they always thought it would just end at more of a hobby type of thing. But meanwhile, I was spending every waking moment, especially when I was introduced the whole turntable scratch and scene. I was just anytime I was able to practice or just make stuff on a 4-track, I would do that. So I remember the idea of staying up all night until the sun comes up. Like I started doing that when I was 12, 13. Yeah.
Well, as a teenager, like what are you experiencing in life where knobs and faders become your outlet? What kind of angst, melancholy, depression, sadness, happiness are you going through?
That's a good question. Well, first of all, I think when you're 12 years old, I think everybody's just looking for that thing they can sink their teeth into and just really push yourself to find like what your limits are in terms of what you can do. For some people it's sports, for some people it's skateboarding. Like with my circle of friends, like it was often that, or b-boying, like breakdancing. That was never an option for me because I'm not a very coordinated dancer at all. So however, I did start on classical piano when I was 4 years old, and up until when I was 12. So I had that dexterity and the ear for it. And when I discovered what was happening in the scratch scene, it was just immediate for me. It's like, I want to learn all about this, and like I said, it was just not because there was any sort of prospect of a future in it. It was really just love the craft and kept doing it. So it was really more an inspirational thing. In high school, I wasn't that moody a kid. I guess I'd like hang out with a lot of gothy girls and stuff and listen to a lot of like The Cure and Jesus and Mary Chain records. Those types of things. So I like that. What you call it? What would you call that kind of music? Angsty music? Is that the word?
I might use that word, yeah.
Yeah, so I had that. There was like that side of it. That was what my sister listened to also. So bands that were out at the time. There was just a lot of wild stuff being released at the time. I remember New Order's Brotherhood album, which was half sort of the post-punk stuff, and the B-side was all all this electronic, futuristic stuff, like obviously Subculture, Bizarre Love Triangle, and those types of tracks, right?
Every time I think of you, I feel shot right through with a bolt of blue. It's no problem of mine, but it's a problem I find. Living a life that I can't leave behind.
Hearing that was mind blowing, and then of course, like, shortly after that, Public Enemy, De La Soul, Cold Cut. Those were the records when I could actually finally afford to buy records, were the ones that were being released at the time, and that absolutely changed my life.
Well, I mean, if you're spending your years learning turntables as a teenager in isolation, and you're hanging out with goth kids and you're listening to, I mean, no matter how introverted you were, people still want you to like DJ their parties, and they're not gonna invite the weird Asian goth loner kid. So, you know what I mean?
Yeah, I think in high school when we had a little mobile system, I had a side hustle, I guess, with my friend Vikram. We had, between the two of us, we had 2 turntables, two mixers, and maybe a crate and a half of records. But yeah, we would get invited to parties to DJ. It'd just be a house party or something, and I remember practicing for those house parties. Mostly it was just playing songs that were out at the time that everyone liked to dance to, or just keep a vibe going. But then I would always have like one moment where it's like, oh, I'm gonna try this like Public Enemy like beat jugglers, and then it would just sort of stop the dance floor, everybody. But I mean, when I say dance floor, I'm talking about like a high school house party, right? So there's like 8 people. But even then, they're like, what is he doing?
It's not like the house parties like on in the movies where there's like 200 kids spilling out into the
No,
front
no,
yard.
no. Yeah, no. I mean, by that time I was living in Maryland, and I guess those houses, or some of the houses that some of the kids lived in, could have turned into that. But I never really. Yeah, I think that's like a Hollywood version,
Yeah.
where everything it's like catastrophic. No, they were smaller house parties, but yeah, it was great to be invited to play at those. In fact, that was getting paid to just DJ house party as a favor for a friend. I mean, that was something. We just spend it right on records right away. But I remember playing some bar mitzvahs and some sweet 16s, and that was a big deal because those kids were older than us, but they knew we had this little mobile setup, show up, roll up with my friend's parents' station wagon and unload everything. Yeah, it was fun
Well, you seem
times.
to have, a good head on your shoulders, as you get past high school. McGill University is nicknamed the Harvard of Canada, so
Uh-huh.
regardless, you're going to good schools, you got a good head on your shoulders. I know you applied to film school, you got in, you didn't go. So, I mean, you had options. Whether you had an interest in physics or childhood education or film school, you had options.
Yeah, I'd done some animation in high school, and submitted to some film festivals, and even used that to apply to NYU Film School, and I got in, and my father actually drove me up from Maryland to New York to visit the campus. And yeah, I thought, oh, this could be fun. At the time, the goalpost was like I just wanted to work on Sesame Street or work with Jim Henson, or I didn't know that there were departments on a show like the Muppet Show. I thought if you worked at the Muppet Show, you would do it all. I thought you would write songs, you would make puppets, you would build sets, you would do animation for Sesame Street. It was a place where I thought all my interests kind of collided. And but my mom, being a pragmatic accountant that she is, kind of broke it down for me. You're 17. Are you sure you want to spend this much on school to make movies? And to be honest, I was like, no, it was just something I was interested in. But I said, oh, she said, why don't you study something a little more pragmatic? Yeah. So I studied at McGill. I studied elementary education, which, to be honest, like to this day, I will argue that the closest thing to show business is trying to teach elementary school, in terms of the adrenaline levels and in terms of you just being on point, like trying to hold the attention of a class of elementary school kids is like, they're the most fickle audience you'll ever have to be in front of. I mean, not that it's a show, but it was sometimes felt like that. Like you had to plan your lesson plans. It's like, oh, how can we make this really boring math lesson entertaining or engaging for this class, and I've taken a lot of what I learned from that and sort of adapted it, and I still use it, in designing, say, shows now, live shows.
Yeah, I wanted to be like devil's advocate, and I was like, well, let me be the role of your mom, and from that POV, because I have kids too, and I was like, if my kid wanted to go to puppeteer school and work on Sesame Street, is that something I'd be proud of? So I dug a little bit, and the guy who did Big Bird,
Right,
and Oscar the Grouch earned $315,000 a year, and when he died,
wow,
when he died in 2019, he had a net worth of $8 million.
wow. See, I didn't have those stats. Maybe that would have helped in my argument, but she was also, I mean, she was right in many ways. She's like, look, I know you like art, and I know. And don't get me wrong, she's my number one fan. She always has been. But then I think her generation, just being first generation immigrants to North America and having kind of just really struggled to make ends meet so that we could go to school and stuff, it was really, I think she equated that like a happy and like not stressful life requires a certain, amount of income. So when I was, shooting at the stars in terms of like I want to be an animator, I want to be a scratch DJ or something, she would ask me point blank, do you know anyone? Can you show me some people that do this for a living? And is this even a job? She saw the work I was putting into, she saw the hours I would practice, and in a way, I think she was entertained by it. Oh, that's cute. He's got something he's into. But when it came time to like talk about, big real life decisions, like what are you going to study in university, and what job are you going to get out of this degree? I couldn't answer those questions. I was like, no, I guess I'm just going to learn how more films are made or something. She did. It was hard for her to stomach that idea. The tuition at NYU was going to be like quite a bit of money, a lot, and plus I'd have to move there and live there, and so she just broke it down. It's like, okay, well, maybe why don't you study something that you can definitely get a job in, and then make stuff on the side, like on the weekends, or with your friends, like work on film projects or whatever. And I said, yeah, you're right. Let's just do it that way. And I honestly, that's what happened. I DJ'd all through college. I was making music and, throwing parties and learning about all that side of things, and whenever I wasn't in class. So it became, in a way, school for that also, whenever I wasn't in class, I was kind of learning about just how the show business worked, I guess, or just the creative business,
Well, I mean, here's how I kind of look at it is like, if you went to puppeteer school and you're Big Bird for 40 years and you have a lot of money, that's cool. But like I give justification to your path because you were discovered by accident with Ninja Tune, and you discovered scratching by accident when you heard Mr. Mix. And let's just say you're a teenager and you go to the store and the SP1200 costs $50 or $500 instead of $5,000.
Yeah,
your career would have taken completely different routes if these little events didn't happen. They're almost like little inspirational accidents.
Absolutely, I think so. There's definitely a Zen way of looking at it, now. Even if I go into a record store, like back then we were digging for stuff to scratch and stuff to put into your sets and things, and sometimes I would just flip through the racks, and if something kind of spoke to me, even visually, I was like, oh, something about this record and being here, I was like, I just want to pick this up. I don't know anything about it. I don't know what label this is. I don't know what kind of music it is, and it would just be one of those things where like, well, something put me in this store at this moment in time, looking through this rack, and this is the one speaking to me, so I'm gonna grab this rack and see what happens. And it was an adventure.
So now you're able to kind of share this craft with a larger audience. A year before you sign, you land a gig opening for Bootsy Collins.
Oh wow, you're digging deep. Yes.
Now, how did he respond to your performance? Because I don't know.
Honestly, I don't even know if he saw it. And also, I think around the same time, Maceo Parker, that was a show I think I still cite as one of those really paradigm shifting moments for me. Going in as a young kid, kind of, a little bit like, okay, what are these old timers going to teach me? And they come up wearing suits and they lay it down, man. They did a 4.5 hour set of just the most amazing. This is just the most amazing night. I was looking at the crowd. There was people, all ages and every, there were raver kids, and then people that look like they, work at a bank or something. But by the end of like the first intro track, everybody's on the same beat and just grooving and smiling, and it was just, yeah, it was a spiritual thing to see in terms of the craft of how they were able to move kind of what would seem like a very disjointed crowd to just get on that funk beat. And it was a great party, you know. I still cite that as like absolutely one of the first times I saw or experienced, you know, that that work ethic on stage.
I'm blown away by like the opportunities that you're able to handle at that age, because you know when you're getting signed, you're like the first non-UK act. You know, you're kind of the new kid on the block, and you're
on Ninja,
Ninja 2, and I mean you're like 21, 22, and you're opening for all these people, and it just seems like a Herculean task for any 22-year-old to have all those insecurities, and then now you have something to prove to your parents and all this. There had to have been moments where you're like, I don't even know if I can do this or if I want to do this.
Oh, there were many moments. That's why Carpal took 4 years, I think, to do a 32-minute record. It should not have taken that long. In fact, I was signed off the Scratch cassette, which I did in 3 months. But what I guess I didn't calculate was the stuff that I'd put on that tape, or some of it was routines that I'd been doing as a DJ since I was 12. Some of those records I've had since I was 5 years old. I knew every drop or like every sound I could kind of twist, you know, through scratching on all that stuff, even though I didn't have that much equipment or anything. It was enough of a statement that Ninja took notice. And, you know, so they asked me, well, okay, so this tape took you how long? And I said, 3 months. But they were like, well, how long would an album take? And I'm like, I don't know, 6 months. I've never thought about it. You know, so I signed a contract saying I would deliver an album in 6 months. Like, who does that? And then when I got into it, it's like one of these. Well, first of all, I was just touring nonstop at that point. It was like, oh, but first, you know, you could come do these stealth tours with us, and that was just a great learning experience and just a dream come true. Like rolling with Cold Cut and DJ Food and Funkee Porcini and Vadim and Alan Tobin and all these amazing artists, and you know, just trying to soak it all in, just learn, like, you know. Even record shopping with those cats was a master class in music. I was having a great time on tour, and then when I'd get home, I would you know, be sitting in front of the recorder going like, I don't really know what I'm supposed to make right now. I remember calling Strictly Cav from DJ Food and I said, should I go buy like a drum machine or a sampler or something? Like, because the cassette was done on a 4-track with just 2 turntables and you know, 4-track layers of 2 turntables. So I really didn't know. I wanted, you know, maybe some structures. Like, oh, they wanted me to do a single at first. I was like, what's that? Like, should I make a DJ version that's just tambourine for 16 bars and then the beat drops? Like, I know from DJing like what would be helpful, like what kind of arrangements work to be a mixable record, so to speak. But you know, Kev just responded to me and said, no, like we signed you because we want you to do like your thing, and like, don't worry about what even anyone else is doing on the label and that style. You don't have to change your style, you just got to do your thing. And that's when the existential creative crisis happened. Because it was literally like a blank sheet of paper and a carte blanche. Just go do whatever you want. It's like, oh, okay. And I was like, I don't know what I want to do. So I just started, you know, cataloging records and listening to. I treated it like a full-time job. And literally, I'd spend like 8 to 10 hours a day just listening to records. Oh, I heard it. I heard a little bit of spoken word here. That's interesting, but I don't know what I would do with it. It's not enough to really like start a whole idea. But I'll just write this down because this is my job now. And I did that for years, literally, when I wasn't on tour. So we go on tour, buy records, come back, and then just have to listen to them out all like thousands and thousands and thousands of hours of records, and find parts that would jump out. But then I guess at one point it hit a tipping point of these certain bits started to kind of it was almost like a little dating service. They would just start lining up with other bits and of sounds and stuff that I was going for. So a few of the songs, as wacky and zany as a lot of my ideas might seem when you read like a byline for it. Oh, it's a mosquito that's trying to join an orchestra, or a robot is trying to write love songs. A lot of this stuff just comes from real life. It's just how I feel at the time, and the time of that record, particularly Carpool. And when you're talking about the pressure that I was kind of putting myself, yeah, there was definitely moments where I said, I don't think I could do this. My girlfriend at the time, even she's like, yeah, it's not like it's not the most joyous thing, because I felt all this pressure to deliver something really good. I didn't want to let anybody down. The label and Cold Cut were, heroes of mine. So it's like the idea of going from, I had a mixtape, and now I actually going to put something out that's going to be racked next to my heroes or next to like a Beatles album or something. Like I wasn't ready pretty much. And I did consider a few times of like, I'm just going to give my advance back. Like, I don't think I'm cut out for this yet. Meanwhile, like the press engine was already in place. I was doing like interviews with Rolling Stone and all this stuff. I'm like, how's the album coming? I'm like, I haven't finished one song. Like, I wouldn't say that, but it was actually, adding to the pressure, the situation. But eventually, I got through it, and the record, I listen to it now, and it definitely brings me back to that, like, quarter life crisis feeling. Like it is all the records are personal in some way, but I listen to that and I can really, it's palpable to me, all the stuff that I was trying to do. Like the other thing is I wanted to make something. My only restriction was I just wanted to do it all on turntables. But as far as what genres of music that could be, it could be anything, or it didn't even have to be a genre. Sometimes a turntable could just be used as a sound design tool or a narrative tool, and I wanted to explore some of that. But it was really kind of a very naive swing at that. And then there's some moments that still kind of crack me up. People, I don't know, for what it's worth, like I delivered the record and I was like, I don't know if they're even going to put this out. It's so weird. But they enjoyed it, and they decided to release it. And while I was going through all that, I was drawing, even sometimes while I was listening to the records, I was just drawing the comic book that eventually came with the record on that first pressing. And yeah, that eventually led to opening other doors too. So I'm glad I went through. But yeah, to answer your question, I almost quit several times, which if you think about it, I guess it would have been what people would call like a sophomore slump. If my first cassette was considered my first record, like the one you spent your whole life making up until that point, and then all of a sudden you have like 6 months to like deliver a follow up to it.
I think you handled the whole situation with grace, because if I would have approached you in high school when you're DJing to 8 people at a high school party, and I said, hey, 8 years later you're going to be at the Garden with Radiohead, I think your head would have exploded.
Oh yeah, 1000%. I mean, I'd been listening to Pablo Honey since it came out, and likewise with the Beasties and Money Mark, and that record, Check Your Head, Paul's Boutique. Check Your Head was the one that really did it for me. I think at that time, again, I was just like, wow, this is at that intersection of punk and like hip hop stuff, and then all of Mark's like instrumental funky jams that they put on there. It was a great record to have. Like, I think I was probably a senior in high school or something, and that was out. We just listened to it all the time.
What about De La Soul? Because I know Deltron 3030 Positive Contact used a De La Soul sample, and with the passing of Dave, do you have any cool overlapping stories with them?
Oh wow! I mean, I'm still processing it. Last night, I got a text from a friend of mine who I've known since high school, and he knew as like De La or 3 Feet High and Rising was one of the reasons I decided to even pursue trying to figure out how to acquire a turntable, or I'm going to start delivering newspapers so that I can afford to buy one of these record players that I see on these album covers in the videos. And yeah, so that record was very much the reason, that Cold Cut and It Takes a Nation of Millions to Hold Us Back. Those 3 records were like a triple knockout. For me, it's like after that, there's no question. I was like, whatever is happening here, like I want to learn more about it, and I want to practice and see if I can do so. All it did was show possibilities, like an infinite possibility there. Those records, so. Yeah, so he wrote me like I guess he's actually in a whole other time zone. It was 4 a.m, and he was just mentioning that, he's still kind of like cut up about the news, and I'm like, yeah, me too. I've just been watching old De La Soul interviews on YouTube that I'd never seen, just because I don't know, it's comforting or something.
Yeah, it was a good time back then too, and it's really cool seeing how many musicians you overlap with. And I want to tell people too is like when your career started, and a lot of these other people's when their career started. I'm not, I don't even know if you're aware. You're probably aware, but I had DJ Newmark on the podcast, and him and Cut Chemist were on Incubus's Battlestar Scratch Lactica, and they didn't get paid a cent because the music industry deemed scratching not a form of music. It wasn't a bakeable element of a song. And the industry, they didn't evolve a year later in 2000 when Deltron 3030 came out. So, how disrespectful is it to be a part of music as a whole? And like, basically, if you weren't cool with Dan or Del, they could have hired a music lawyer and cut you out. And they would have actually had a case. People don't realize how much of an uphill climb a turntablist has had to do in music over the last 25 years.
I mean, the only time like that was made apparent to me was I remember playing a jazz festival once, and this must have been in the 90s or something, and they wanted so like, okay, so we need to do your invoice, and so you need to write what instrument you play for the show so we can pay you. And I said turntable, and then they wrote back and I said we can't that's not on the list. So like they basically said, can you just write backup vocalist or keyboard or something, anything else? And, it was, and I said, oh, okay, I guess yeah, I scratch some backup vocals, sometimes. And then I put that in there, like, yeah, cool. And then here's your check for your show.
But they want to identify you as a keyboardist. And what's really crazy is
well, yeah, I mean, it just wasn't on it was just such a foreign concept, which to me, I understand, but scratching had been around for 20 years already. And I mean, as far as practicing is concerned, man, I practiced this instrument just as much as a drummer would have drummed through high school. It's the same thing, but I think, yeah, at the time it was actually kind of fun to be part of the confusion of that moment. I remember for a while there, everyone cites this quote. I don't even know if it's true, but they were like, oh yeah, it turns out like turntables were outselling guitars or whatever, like for a while in the night. There was a shift, like, what is happening? But everything goes in cycles. So, but at the time it was pretty funny. Like, I remember my first show in New York City was at Wetlands, and kind of an iconic, rock club there, and on the Tech Rider were the three turntables, and I get there, and it was my first New York show. Obviously, I wanted to go well with Ninja Tune, and I get there, and there's one turntable. I would bring my mixer. I still bring my mixer, but the Techniques 1200s that are used are pretty standard, so you could usually rent them. So there was one turntable, and then I said, "Oh no, we asked for 3 turntables. That's like how my show works." And they're like, "What do you need 3 turntables for?" But then, so they got the other 2 turntables. It took about an hour, and there's like already a lineup forming outside the club, and then so we get the turntables. I'm like, oh, "Okay, cool." And then I said, "But where's the table to put the turntables?" And they're like, "What? You need a turn?" It was a time where they're like, "Oh yeah, you need a bass amp. We get that, or you need the drum kit or whatever." But so it was one of those situations. I think we ran to Staples or something, just bought like a fold out table and ran it back to the club, walking it in front of a lineup around the block, people that were about to see the show, and it was I don't know. I kind of giggle about those old times,
Yeah, it's like in order to get signed by a label in the 90s as a turntablist, it has to be a label that's run by a musician. You need a Cold Cut, a DJ Food, a Peanut Butter Wolf, because Elliot Reed or Jimmy Iovine, you're not getting signed in the 90s as a turntablist.
No. Yeah, at the time, like the idea of people even buying a ticket to go watch a scratch DJ perform or something, like it wasn't a thing. If you had prior to that, it was like, oh, okay, you got this moment, like within a rap group set, there would be like one moment. It would be my favorite moment, but at the same time, it'd be one little solo in this show, or at a battle, and the battles would happen maybe twice a year in every city, and the rest of the time, you retire back to your bedrooms and just practice scratching at home until your next chance to play in front of an audience. So at that time, when Ninja were touring so much, I could sense like, oh wow, there's a shift, especially when we're over in Europe and stuff, like where they're starting to understand, oh, okay, this is how this works, and people actually come check this out. Like there's an audience for it, and yeah, it's a nice feeling.
So if you've been a part of making music to this audience for such a long time, when you hear someone like Macklemore say that your music got him through college, do you secretly expect the phone to ring when he comes out with a new album, or you've learned early on that that's not how the music business works?
Macklemore said that? Whoa.
Like you have these current acts that are winning Grammys, and they're like, "Oh man, Deltron and all that." Like they were.
Do I expect the phone to ring? No, but I don't know. It's like it depends if they were looking for some really abstract scratch layers on their songs, which I don't know how many people think that way when they're producing their stuff.
Because you're on the set of Looper a year later. Joseph Gordon-Levitt's on Stardate. That's not a coincidence. I'm sure he was a fan.
Yeah, he actually did talk a lot about Deltron.
See?
Yeah, and similarly, but I'd met Ryan actually prior to Looper, prior to him shooting Looper. We had met, and he was talking about Carpal, and I was talking about Brick. And I said, yo, like you created your own language with Brick. Like at no point did I not understand what was going on. But then it's almost like the script reads like Canterbury Tales. Like, you know what I mean? Like, but it was just mind-splinteringly deep and advanced, the concept and the way he executed it. Well, just filming it at his high school, I think, in San Clemente. I just dug his whole, at the time, like super DIY, like let's just we're gonna make this thing happen, Yeah, and he continues to do that, with all every project he takes on. I'm like, wow, it's really inspiring to see.
There's a lot of parallels between like a movie like Brick and the music that Deltron was coming out with, because you're giving the public something that they're not used to, and it's going to take a while to catch on. And I have this really weird memory. I remember the Gorillaz came out a few months after Deltron, and there was a show called 106 in Park, and the new joint of the day was Clint Eastwood, and man, they trashed it because it stood the test of time, obviously, but at the time it was different, and people have herd mentality when it comes to music.
Right. It's funny, because I had heard, I was in London doing the turntables for like a day. I was actually there on tour with Ninja, and Dan had said, "Hey, I see you're in London. Like, you gotta come meet me at the studio." I'm like, "Why? What's going on?" And he tells me, briefly describes what Gorillaz is, and I said, "Wait, Jamie Hewlett from Tank Girl?" I actually went because I was like, the comic book artist, and he's like, "Yeah," and he's like, "So the studio's there?" Like, and he's like, "Yeah," and I'm like, "Oh, cool." I'm because I just wanted to see, original Jamie Hewlett artwork, to be honest. So I kind of got enlisted to throw some turntable bits on a few of the tracks. I remember, there's a few of them. I don't even remember what the titles were. I don't even know if they had titles at the time. But yeah, the one that featured Dell was on there. And then speaking with Dell, it was one of those things too where none of us really knew, because we weren't plugged in listening to the radio or anything, but Dell was like walking around the Bay Area, and someone walks up to him and was like, "Yeah, I keep hearing your track on the radio." And he's like, "Oh, really? Which one?" Like he had no idea what song he was talking about. And similarly with me, I didn't quite understand, or didn't quite realize at the time, like when that track kind of hit what was happening. No one gave us the memo. We'll play it at the end of the Deltron set, just like in the encore or something, and to see everybody, sing along like it's some anthem. Like, wow, it's crazy. Again, I just did the scratches. It's got nothing to do with me. I mean, that track was pretty fully formed by the time I got to it anyway. Yeah, I just did a little, push and pull on the turntables at the end.
Well, it's great for creativity, right? But is it frustrating from a financial standpoint, or maybe you're jaded that the general public or your fans don't trust you when it comes to what you do? Like, I want Creatures of the Late Afternoon. I know Kid Koala can put out good music, but I don't know if he can make a fun and capable board game. Right. Does something like that add a barrier to entry for a release of a project? Or, hey, man, I'm almost 50. I've been doing this. I'm a master at my craft. I know what I'm doing.
In terms of like, am I nervous about this record?
Well, no one, like, I know that you're going to put out projects because you have the autonomy to put out projects that you enjoy, and that you know what your fans can expect. But you're also this outlier where like everything you do might take a couple years for the general population to catch up. Maybe people didn't get Clint Eastwood at the time. Maybe people didn't get Deltron at the time. Maybe people don't get putting out a board game with an album at the time. And is there a trade-off for like your creativity and then also trying to make a living and feed your daughters?
Well, let's put it this way. I think if I were to give you my top 10 album list or my top 10 movie list, like none of these would have been, box office smash movies. You know what I mean? Like if I were to just say movies, I would say Peter Jackson's Brain Dead or Dead Alive, as it was called here, wasn't it? Yeah. Or like Big Trouble in Little China. There were these films, like Carpenter's Big Trouble in Little China. There were these films that prior to that film, like I had no idea a film could be that, right? And then after that film, I see people kind of, referencing it, or I'll meet directors and they'll say, "Oh yeah, I saw that movie 1,000 times." But at the time when it came out, like nobody knew what to do with it really in terms of, you know what I mean? It wasn't like smashing box office records or anything, but that movie did change, at least for me, like from an artistic standpoint, like, oh my gosh, that's possible. Like De La's 3 Feet High and Rising, although that was a verified hit hit record. But when when I heard it, I was just like, oh wow, can you imagine? Like this changes everything, Not that I'm saying that about my records, but I would say the stuff that inspired me was never like your Billboard #1 song. Like I never aspired to just make music that would play on that kind of pop radio or anything. It was like the Public Enemy 12-inch single, and not even the album version of Night Living Bassheads. It was the extended, version with all the extra weird moments on the 12-inch that was really got me going. Like I was like, oh yeah, this is it. That's what inspired me to learn more about the craft and how do they make this music. Those things, I mean, that would never play on the radio. It's like 8 minutes long unless it was your own radio station. But the excitement of it was just so, I don't know, renegade, like what they were doing. It was just super rad. I don't know. So I guess my taste in general, which also is my inspiration of my goalposts of what I think is fun, exciting music to work on, isn't like usually your top 40 stuff.
Yeah, I don't think it's too far-fetched for, the biggest star in the world 30 years from now to say that he was inspired by creatures of the late afternoon, so.
I don't know if that's going to happen. Like we operate on such a niche, and that I'm actually perfectly happy and comfortable here. It's like I've been able to tour for this many decades and just found like this fun-loving kind of adventurous audience. It's not Madison Square Garden size, but at least we can go to different places, and there's it seems to be there's an audience that is up for the adventure, whether it's a different style of show like Satellite Turntable Orchestra, where everybody gets a turntable and you have to play the concert with me, or Storyville Mosquito, or even more recently just Leilani and I, her on MPC and guitar and me on turntables, just trying stuff. Like I definitely value that freedom to pursue that your muse, really just try to find that thing that gets you up in the morning. It's like, I can't wait to work on this more. This is like discovering new stuff here.
Well, I want to illustrate, if people come to see you on tour now, you said something where you said that you look up to jazz musicians because they really hit their stride when they're 70 years old, and you're right about that. And you also said that as you get older, it's easier to communicate ideas through your instrument. Are you finding that sentiment to be true as you're getting older yourself?
Again, when I was in high school, I wasn't old enough to get into clubs. I couldn't showcase it and anything. I was just practicing all the time. So when I was actually in university and finally old enough to go to clubs here in Montreal, again, when it came to scratching or performing turntables in that manner, it wasn't a possibility unless it was at a battle. The idea, I think that's it. Like at the time, like when I was young, or it was a battle, you had 5 minutes. I had to show you everything I could do in 5 minutes. That was the structure of the battle, just like almost an Olympic routine in a way. Can you do the triple axel? Can you land this? Can you do whatever it is? It was this type of showcase. But I think as things have evolved, and from playing in music, playing in bands, scoring films, scoring video games, and just realizing there's different contexts to how music can help the experience, or an experience, whether it's a live experience, a filmed experience, video game, what have you. Regarding Creatures of the Late Afternoon, on that topic, not only is it, is it my 8th album? Wow. It's a turntable album, 20 tracks, all made on through scratching. This time I have a record cutter in my studio, so I played all the instruments, wrote the songs, and then recorded the instruments: guitar, bass, drums, Hammond organ, whatever, saxophone, whatever it is I could find, and then cut those stems to vinyl on my record cutter, and then reassembled everything, on 2 turntables. So all the beats, I wanted to have that kind of live juggled vibe. And to me, it's a very kind of pure turntable record, but it also serves as the soundtrack to our next production in the style of Euphonium Westfalen and Story of a Mosquito.
Well, I'm gonna have all that in the show notes, and I know your time is valuable. I don't take it for granted, and I really appreciate you stopping by.
Thank you so much.